this show is about is a pastor wrote to me out of concern that I was using the word sodomite to describe homosexuals, gays, and thought this was going to defeat my purpose. It was hateful. It was going to turn people against me. And I've read his first letter to me, my response, which included these 2 articles which I've just finished reading, explaining why I think it is crucial that we use God's terminology. And now I'm about to read his letter back to me after reading that. Now here's the pastor's response after reading my 2 articles. Again, he's writing back to express his concern because I used the word sodomite during part of my campaign as a candidate for the Iowa Senate. Okay. He writes back, I know you appreciate open communication and dialogue, and everything you do is well thought out. I love what you sent me below. Good reading. I have not done extensive research on the etymology of the term sodomite, but it is limited to Old Testament use and seems most often to refer to male prostitutes, often involved in worship at pagan shrines. While I saw one reference to a feminine form of the word, the main contextual usage refers to male temple prostitutes. So, besides the unnecessarily inflammatory element, it does not match the scope of the issue you are addressing. I could say, but Dave, what about lesbian marriages? Your terminology doesn't cover that. Romans 1:26 to 27 covers it for sure. I'm just saying that you need a term that encompasses all that Romans talks about and more. So I guess I prefer the term homosexuality. They prefer the term gay community, but I don't think we have to use that term. Economic pressures also tear apart our families as we work to accumulate more and more stuff. We're trading work time for family time. We might as well be sacrificing our children on the altar of Moloch. It's just as evil, but I would never say sodomites and Molochites are ruining our country, even though both terms are biblical. Restoring love to the family. Greed destroys our families. Homosexuality undermines our families. Secular education undermines our families. Okay, have to go. We'll talk again. Thanks for the response. I was just reading this. I was thinking, it's interesting that the pastor draws the line. He says he acknowledges the gays would actually rather be called gays. I don't think we have to do that. I'll call them homosexuals. But you shouldn't be calling them sodomites. Well, it's interesting where you draw the line. Is calling them homosexuals going to make the liberals any happier with you? Well, I suppose it might make conservatives happier with you, but I want to explain why it just isn't enough to use the word homosexuals. This is my final letter. I haven't received another response from the pastor back again to this. Explaining why my answer to the pastor, who was concerned because I used the word sodomite as part of my campaign for Iowa Senate. Etymology can be complicated. By the way, etymology means a study of the origin of words. In other words, to establish where did this word sodomite come from? What does it really mean? Etymology can be complicated. We have the word sodomite directly from the King James Version rendering of a word in Hebrew meaning male temple prostitute. But since hardly anyone knows that, the connection in the popular mind is to people who follow in the footsteps of the men of Sodom. Almost everyone's heard of Sodom and Gomorrah and what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, what God did to them, raining hellfire, apparently literally, down onto Sodom. Since hardly anyone knows that the King James word sodomite comes from the rendering of a Hebrew word meaning male temple prostitute, therefore the connection in the popular mind is to people who follow in the footsteps of the men of Sodom. That, too, is a grammatically legitimate source of our term sodomite. Any person who follows in the footsteps of the men of Sodom is correctly labeled a sodomite, even if the word sodomite had never appeared in the Bible. In American law, until just over 50 years ago, sodomite was defined as oral sex without reference to the sexes of those involved, apparently presuming heterosexuals would never dream of such a thing. But the point is, I never heard of any American ever thinking that America's sodomy laws were limited to male temple prostitutes. The problem with using the word homosexual is that it is morally neutral. The sound of the word sodomite is a graphic reminder of the behavior of Sodom, and a reminder of how seriously God was repulsed by it. Using the term in public discussion interjects God into the public discussion. America is in deep, deep trouble. I have no vision of her rescue through mere human wisdom, even if I can somehow manage to get myself elected. I do have a vision of restoration. If Americans will once again be unashamed of God, quote, "and of my words," Mark 8:38. So it is hardly the case that I am not taking this campaign seriously. To the contrary, I am taking it more seriously than most dare dream. It is no mere foothill I pray God will help me heave into the sea, but the tallest mountain. I pray that my fellow Christians will stop being embarrassed to use God's terminology and to proclaim sin for what it is. To miss the mark is what the word means in Greek, which implies to miss your own goals or to shoot yourself in the foot, or in the figure God used on Paul, to stop kicking the roses barefoot. Paul was out persecuting Christians. The great light shined on Paul, knocked him off and blinded him, and the voice came with the light, says, "Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Why do you keep kicking against the pricks?" Pricks are thorns, and for a man in those days to kick thorns, you see, they didn't have steel-toed boots in those days. They had sandals. You might as well be barefoot. So therefore, a reasonable translation of that is, why are you kicking the roses barefoot? Which is what we do when we reject God's pleading for us to stop shooting ourselves in the foot. So I wrote to the pastor, can you imagine pastors once again preaching against sodomy and using that word defying every news reporter and PC cop? We would have revival. No. We will have revival.